All right. Lauren, I've just in the short 10 minutes that we've been talking before we got on here, I feel like I've learned so much from you and about you. And so, welcome to Tea Talks. I am so really privileged to have you here to share your story and your journey. And why don't we give you this opportunity to just introduce yourself and that wonderful company that you've started?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lauren Huffmaster, and I have been living with metastatic breast cancer. And from my cancer diagnosis till now, it's been almost 8 years. So I was diagnosed stage 3, and then immediately after stage 4. And from that diagnosis, I wanted to really pursue legacy. I didn't know how long my life would go, but I wanted to go deeper if it couldn't go longer. And so when I was diagnosed, my kids were 2, 4, and 6. And so it really was driven by my actions, and my choices were really driven by a desire to leave a legacy for my children. Even if they couldn't remember me, I wanted them to have something that they would have known who I would have been or what I would have done if I had been around. And so I began Adventure Therapy Foundation, a nonprofit. And from there, I've just dug deeper, listened to hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of other survivors and patients. And I've established a philosophy around the experience of cancer. And I call it the emotional side effects of cancer. And I'm doing a lot of work in that. I have a podcast and a book coming out.
Yes, yes, because that was the name that you chose for this cast as well, the emotional side effects of cancer. Now you said you had when you were diagnosed, your kids were 2, 4, and 6. So I'm thinking you're still fairly young then.
Yeah, I was in my 30s when I was diagnosed.
Wow. Does cancer run in your family?
No.
It doesn't run in your family.
There's no genetics that they can find right now that demonstrate it comes from my family.
Wow, wow. That's the more and more we're hearing that, right? Because I think many of us, including myself, felt a sense of safety and security because that wasn't in your family. But the more I speak to people, I realize that that's no longer what the benchmark is or whatever. So I mean, thank you for sharing that. But when I was reading on your website, and there was an exchange between you and a stranger in an airport that kind of helped to encourage you or pushed you towards forming your nonprofit. Can you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I was diagnosed with metastatic disease in December, and then I immediately just wanted sort of to start learning more. And I went to a cancer conference in the early spring, and it was right before that conference that I was feeling a shift in me. If you read my story, I had about what I say 10 weeks of darkness where I lived in hopelessness and fear, and the only thought was death and how to make sure my house was clean enough when I died. Like there was nothing to live for. I just thought I was going to die. And there was a shift in me that happened, a very specific moment when I saw a vision in my head, and I saw that if I kept living for death, if I kept living to die, my life would become very small and would really just get smudged and disappear. But if instead I lived and decided just to expand, just to push upward and outward always, then my potential was limitless. And I had this vision sort of right before I went on this experience to the conference. And the whole time I was there, I just felt this idea grow in me, this idea that anything was possible. There was nothing, if I wasn't going to be afraid of dying, there was nothing left to be afraid of. I could try anything, I could do anything, and there was no real things to fear, no consequences that would impede me from trying. And so as I was at this conference, this idea just grew and grew. And on the way home, in the airport, the Denver airport, I was just sitting, grabbing tea, trying to get on a plane. And I was wearing sort of an ironic hat. And a man across from me at this little table in the middle of the hallway said, "What is up with your hat?" And we started talking there. And before long, like in the matter of minutes, we went from my hat to my story to what I was feeling and my expectations now that my life had shifted. And he, I think, just could feel this hope, this possibility, this purpose that was bubbling inside of me. And I didn't know who he was. He was just a guy across the table. And he said, listen, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to build, I want to build it with you. And I was like, okay. And
Wow.
I tore off a corner of my book and he wrote his number on that. And turns out he's a lawyer who helped nonprofits and helped found nonprofits. He works in sports science, and he's using that. He's currently using sports science as a brain trust to see if they could apply some of that to cancer at that very moment. And what's interesting is in that next season, everyone I told my story to, they responded with, whatever you want, whatever you want to do, I want to do it with you. And out of what seemed to be nothing, so many things were created and grew. People built my website. They helped me give me money to found the organization, and it began. I'd always thought I would do something like this, start a nonprofit, but I had no idea how I would ever do something like this. And it was, as soon as I started declaring, I want to do something with my story, the opportunities were always present. And I've grown the organization for the last 5 years. We've helped hundreds, if not thousands of people. It's just continuing to grow because I keep looking for opportunities for it to grow. And I always just have what I need when I need it.
Wow, this is, we talked a lot about purpose before we got on the live here, Lauren, and I'm just thinking about what you're saying, how you discovered or stepped into your purpose really after your diagnosis, after something that's so scary. You talked about that 13 or 10 weeks of darkness. What was that like?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed, so when I got the call, it was Christmas. It was the last day of school, before Christmas break. I had a planned party for all the second graders in our school to come over, and there was cookies and lights and everything was perfect. And at that moment, I literally pulled a tray of cookies out of the oven and my phone rang. So I'm like, busy mom, like Christmas music and cookies. And I'm like talking, and it was my doctor. And all she said was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're so young. And it was like in that moment, all the lights went out. I ran upstairs to my room, which was completely dark, and I just collapsed on the floor and I just wept and wept. And there was really I didn't know any reason to get off that floor. I say I wept in that darkness until that darkness just enfolded me and became me. And from that day, for the next 10 weeks, I got up and tried to make my death easier. I tried to die better. And I started making funeral plans, and I cleaned out my closet, and I separated my things into 3 piles for my girls. And every day I was just trying to make it less complicated for my family if I were to pass away. And that's what my life was. There was no future that I could see, no future that I could understand with this disease in my life. And that was my dark period. I had to literally change everything I knew. I had to believe something completely different in order to move out of that. And one day, like I said, I was on the side of my bed. I sat up and I just felt frozen there. And I had this idea, this vision. And the idea did not change the reality. I didn't have better scans. I didn't change my medications. I didn't have any proof, but I chose to believe a different future was possible. And I chose in that moment to begin to live. And when I did that, everything that followed was different. And now I've been living for 8 years. What if I had wasted years in that state of mind? What if I had wasted years of memories and impact and all of these things I could have created?
Right.
But instead, I just irrationally optimistic. I embraced something different, and I chose to live by anything different than this idea that I was going to die. And that is what has revolutionized my life.
It took a decision, and it took you being intentional for that to happen. Wow, that is really powerful. What is your age? What does your foundation help others to do?
So my foundation started out with adventure because during my cancer treatments, I'd always run away and sort of get a new perspective before my next treatment. So we started out with adventure, and we gave away still give away free retreats to families, because that's the other thing that was really important to me, is that we acknowledge the whole family. My children will never have a memory that's not tainted by cancer, not impacted by cancer. Yet, how many organizations are acknowledging the emotional impact of cancer on our families and our children? There's just so little resources, tools, even acknowledgement on the impact of the whole family by cancer. So I started an organization that really focused on families. And we started there. And as we've moved through the years, I've been able to sort of focus my philosophy, my ideas, get it more clear to me and to everyone else. And yeah, so now we do a lot of trainings. I've become a cancer coach. We're leading retreats that are more about personal development rather than just adventure. And we just keep supporting families however they need.
When you say, well, because I saw where you said you're a cancer coach, and when you said when you said that you're coaching families, are you coaching the cancer patient as well as the cancer patient's family? And you said personal development. So are you making it not so much cancer focused but more purpose focused? What does your training look like?
Yeah. So, well, I went through, there's not many organizations that can train you specifically as a life coach for cancer, but I went through one called the Cancer Journey Institute. And it's usually the women who will sit down and want this, right? So even if the husband has cancer, it's usually the wife who wants to come and like walk through things. So I will just say that. But yeah, so mostly what I'm looking at is, again, this change of perspective. What mindset are you in, and where do you want to be? And we talk about how our identity. One of the three things that I really focus on are fear, isolation, and identity. And identity is the hardest one to really understand, because our expectations in life, what we can do in life, our relationships really make up our identity. And I think this is the piece of cancer that shakes people because they don't expect it. But besides your physical identity changing, it's really about, what do you expect in 10 years? What did you expect? And now what do you? And what relationships are still there? There's so much about our identity that is changing and breaking and shifting. And that's really where people need the most clarity. And so we walk through. I've learned a lot of tools through my trainings, but also my own philosophy. We walk through my ideas on, what does healing look like, emotional healing from the cancer experience look like? And I walk people through that and help them really put words to emotions, because emotions are like these vague feelings that really can overwhelm us, but it's hard to say them out. Like, how do we explain to your friends what you're feeling inside? That's a hard thing to do. So one of my biggest thing is just to put vocabulary to the experience and let people start building their own clarity within their family and their friends.
Lauren, before we got online, we talked about how the cancer. You said something so beautiful to me. You said the cancer of today, right, is not the cancer of 20 years ago. It's still cancer. And you talked about this idea of getting the fear factor out of it. When you get that phone call, and that horrible phone call that puts you to your knees for sure immediately, if you're a person of faith. But you said that we should honor the past. You said that those research from the past is the reason why you are living here today, why I am here today, because of all the efforts that went into the past. I think that's so beautiful. And that we should really base our experiences now and our expectations almost on what we have now, not what we've heard about and all the bad stories that we've heard about. And there's still tough stories now. I get it. But, in the past, when someone had a cancer that had metastasized, it was, oh my God, like you said, let's start planning the funeral. But we know people were living, 17, 18 years in this state, and more research is coming. And so I just think that, again, it just shows the power of your thinking, of your thought process, because if we look at it that way, then we're starting from here, not from what it used to be. And I think that's a really great point. This Peter asks, so inspiring to hear your choice to rise up out of that dark period. Do you think that also helped you with your therapy and or managing your cancer?
Yeah, I think so, because it's mindset, right? And if I am, well, first of all, we are learning that the stress levels and our mindset really impacts the rest of our body, right? So if you have, like, stress leads to negative health outcomes. So if I'm living every day assuming that I'm going to die, my mental stress levels are off the charts, and therefore it's going to lead to negative health outcomes, no matter whether it's cancer or something different. And so, yes, mindset needs to be married with this idea of physical health. What we think, how we think, is going to impact our bodies. And so
Mhm.
we have to start to come to this understanding, that it's not just like hope is like this idea
Right.
for only gurus or something. No, like, hope is something we all need to stir up inside of us, because listen, it is just as easy to imagine the best case scenario as it is the worst case scenario. So why do we keep choosing worst case scenario in our minds and let that play out, when we could choose best case scenario and let something different happen? So I
It's
think this is really important. The other thing you're saying is around fear. We need to separate fear and uncertainty. These are
true.
two different things. Uncertainty, we cannot control. I cannot control what will happen in my cancering life. I can't, but I can control how I respond to that. And that's my emotional choice, my mental choice. That's whether I choose fear or hope. But fear, just because I'm living in uncertainty, does not mean I have to live in fear. Those are two different things. But we've sort of put them together and forgotten that we can separate those out.
I've never heard that explained that way before. And I think it's so important for a cancer patient or anyone going through a tough disease, right? Or,
Mhm.
chronic disease. Fear and uncertainty are two different things. You're right. The uncertainty, we don't know what's going to happen, but so does everyone else who doesn't have cancer, right? They don't know if they're going to, what's going to happen to them tomorrow either. But they're not living in fear. And so, and it's a little bit harder for a cancer patient to make that choice. But boy, having it explained that way, that yes, we can have uncertainty, but we don't have to have fear. And that's a really beautiful piece. Sarah is my partner in crime on here, the founder
Okay.
of Total Health. She said, as much as cancer is very serious and scary, so many cancers are now just like having chronic disease. And Sarah is a cancer advocate. She is right about mindset and stress. But my question here is, how do you speak to yourself when you're facing your hardest days? Can you give us an example?
Definitely, Sarah. So actually, tomorrow I start chemo again. Like, I go into the chemo. That's 6 hours in the chair. I'm gonna lose my hair, all of the things. And so this moment today should be like one of those hardest days, right? I think that the hard piece, the mental game we have to play in cancer, is to not look to the back, not think about the last time I had chemo, not really look too far to the future, but really live in the moment. And I know we hear this idea, and we're told over and over this is key to happiness and stuff, but I have to. Today, I have to live in the moment. If I feel stress about tomorrow, or what I'm going to look like without hair, or what I'm going to feel like at Christmas, I have to remind myself. Literally last night, I was trying to go to bed and I said, like, I have everything I need for right now. I have
Mhm.
everything I need for this moment. I have family and home and safety, and I'm good right now. And just remembering where you are, because a lot of the stress of life comes from what was and what will be. But right now, we're good, but we're losing we're losing the gift of now because of the other extremes, the past and the future. And so for me, for example, I have to just, again, especially when I'm working with other people who are going through end of life, or dealing with grief, I can come along with them. I can align with them, walk through these difficult seasons, but I have to remember my story is not their story. I can honor their story. I can encourage their story, but my story is not their story. I have to know that my story is different. And today I'm good. I'm living a different life than I will maybe at Christmas, but I don't need to worry about Christmas today. I'll get through today. And these are the kinds of tools that help me. My 8 years ago cancer chemo will not be the same as this year's chemo. I'm a different person. My body is different. There's going to be different results. And so we just have to remind ourselves where we are today, what tools, what education, what supports, and keep moving into that.
Beautiful, Lauren. You're just so encouraging. Sarah says we are with you. All our team here, sending you so much loving and healing energy. And have you considered cold caps? Have you ever heard of it? Cold caps?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's another organization as well that I've worked with. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to go through all of that, but I'm embraced. I'm going to get a lot of scarves and head wraps. It's going to be beautiful.
We also talked about, you were doing a little bit of a fasting before your chemo. We were talking about the benefits of fasting, and you said you were looking into that, and I shared with you that I had done like a 7-day fast before my surgery. So I know fasting can be tough, but I also felt like it's so beneficial in preparing your body. And so you've already been on a 2-day water fast. And for those of you who haven't fasted for 2 or 3, 4, or 7 days with water, it can be quite tough. But at the same time, it's mentally strengthening your body as well. And you also mentioned too, Lauren, that you're a person of faith, and you feel like God's used this experience to allow you to have this ministry and able to really encourage others. So tell us a little bit about the fasting. But before that, there was this other question. You being so young, why did you have to have a mammogram or a test? What happened?
I found a lump. Yeah.
Oh,
So
you found a lump. Okay. All right. That. I was just wondering, why would you be doing that? Okay, that makes sense. So just tell us a little bit about your fasting and why you're doing it.
yeah, I haven't met many people who are embracing fasting, but even this morning, my husband was like, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" So I looked it up. There's an article in March of this year on fasting and fast mimicking diets and chemo. And I read through them just to remind myself I'm on the right track. But 2 days of fasting before chemo locks down your healthy cells and opens up your cancer cells. And the research is showing that you're going to kill more cancer cells. You're going to protect your DNA. You're going to protect your healthy cells. You're not going to have any nausea. You're not going to have all the fatigue. I mean, I just read it this morning, and there's so many positive. They said they don't even recommend nausea medication before chemo if you've been on a fast mimicking diet or you've been on water fast. And so to me specifically, when I did ACT 8 years ago, I know the damage it did to my brain. It damaged my heart. And I don't want this damage to be perpetual throughout my life. I want to minimize, as much as I can, the damage to my brain and my heart. And so fasting, I've always fasted. I do clinical trials on myself. I fast for 2 days. I check my tumor markers. I fast for 3 days. I check my tumor markers. I see where that impact is showing up. And so fasting is something I've always leaned into, but especially now that I'll start chemo, both to make sure that cancer dies as quickly as possible, but also to protect the rest of my body.
I would love for you to come back and tell us how it went this round with your chemo. Again, we're sending you so much love with that, and we just thank you for sharing that that piece with us. I know you also speak on faith. Do you want to touch on that a little bit before we go? I'd love to hear how has that helped to carry you through your journey.
Definitely. Yeah, I think my faith really allows me to embrace purpose. There's nothing more important than the purpose of living a life that impacts others, that uses my weakness to become the strength of others. And when I get sad or weak or whatever, I know it just gives me such value even the hard struggles. I can value them because I know that next month and next year I'll run into someone who's in this low point and I can feel them. They don't have to explain anything to me. I will know exactly what they feel, the thoughts running through their head. And this is the understanding that we all long for. We all want to belong. We all want to be known. And the only way I can truly help the cancer community and help others through the experience of cancer is to know the weaknesses, the lowest points. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, to faith is gives me a foundation, but also gives me, a constant state of strength. Because even if I physically am weak or even mentally are just like done, I have somewhere to turn that says, I know where to get more strength. I know where to get more physical strength. I know where to find my purpose and my hope. And those things really can't be shaken, no matter what the circumstances of cancer or treatments do for me.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Lauren, I don't know if you want to answer this question. Peter's a scientist on our team. Can you tell us a little more about your specific cancer type and your therapy surveillance plan? Is there any targeted therapy possibility for you?
Yeah, so we just did a bunch of genetic testing. I was estrogen positive for the last 7 years, and then we just had a little spot on my liver, and now it's looking to be triple negative. So we're really transitioning everything with this new information. Last week, we did a number of genetics tests to see if I could try anything that was targeted. For now, I'm going to start paclitaxel, and I'm going to do every 3 weeks. So hopefully I can still travel 2 weeks out of the month. And so that I'm not really in the chair all the time. I think the mental damage, the mental drainingness of going in every week sort of indefinitely is almost harder than the physical weight of having the heavier doses every 3 weeks. So that's my plan for the time being until we can identify a targeted therapy.
Do they know how long you're going to be in chemo? Like, do you know how many rounds you're going to have to do? Do
At
they?
the
Did
moment, Yeah, at the moment she's saying 6 months, and or until, again, it depends if we can find a targeted therapy. If we can push it back and then maybe bring up Keytruda or something different, then we wouldn't have to be as long. But she told me to prepare for 6 months. But that's if it responds and if we have something else after that. So we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Well, we're going to definitely be lifting you up. I think there's one more question. Our weakness is made perfect by His strength. His grace is sufficient for us, and His mercies are new each morning. We will wake up in prayer for you, Lauren. Sarah's a person of faith as well. So is Peter. And I already shared with you before we got on here. Faith is like the anchor for me. So, I mean, we will definitely lift you up in prayer, and with your attitude, with your faith, I am believing. I'm lifting you, but I'm also believing for great, great outcomes. And you said just so many things that you've said that I think is just so helpful. And it's like it's still not yesterday's cancer. Okay, it's still not yesterday's cancer. There's therapies, there's things that we have today that people before us did not have, and so we want to keep remembering that and keep moving forward with that. And you're a beautiful person outwardly, by the way. I mean, you look very beautiful today, and you're certainly a beautiful person on the inside. And Tea Talks, we like to end with something uplifting. I mean, you're already uplifting us, but we want to end with something uplifting because Tea Talks is based on T cells. That's where we got the name. And we're going to pray that your T cells really knock stuff out. So as we end the show today, can you leave us with something that would encourage our T cells today?
Encourage your T cells. Sure. I think we should all be more irrationally optimistic. We don't need the future of cancers, research and meds. We don't need it to really showing up today. We can just believe that it will be there when we need it to be there. And I'll give you two examples. It was 2 months before I was diagnosed metastatic that the medicine was approved by the FDA. When I needed it, it was there, but it was only there 2 months before I was diagnosed. And it gave me 5 years with no side effects, perfect quality of life, everything. 5 years with no progression. And, I think we have to, so I don't know what I'm going to need in 3 years or 3 months or 5 years, but I believe then in 3 months and 3 years and 5 years, exactly what I need is going to be right there waiting for me. And that's why I believe we're the first generation of true survivors, because we are going to continue. There's breakthroughs every single day, but we can't waste our todays because we don't know what's coming tomorrow, right? We have to
love it.
Today.
Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. That is an exceptional way to end our show today. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your journey. Please, as best as you can, keep in touch with me, just even via, messaging. We want to know how else we can pray for you. We know what we're going to pray about, and we thank you for encouraging us because you have today in such a great way. And if we had just a bit of your optimism, I tell you, there's nothing we couldn't do. So we just really want to thank you. And Peter, I love that. Everyone should be irrationally optimistic. I'm going to actually put that on a sticky note and put on my desktop. Be irrationally optimistic. I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you guys who are in the chat and those who are watching on the replay. Lauren's blog, I put a link to her blog there. She has some great content on her blog, very uplifting. Please follow her and support her ministry, her agency. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you guys on Monday. Take care.